The throne room of the Vrayan Dominion was a cathedral of living bone and black glass, humming with the pulse of alien life. At its center sat the queen, tall, elegant, terrifyingly beautiful, in the way venomous creatures are. Her eyes, slit like a serpent's, watched the trembling envoy of the Galactic Council bow before her. The alien's voice quavered as it spoke of Earth, of the humans who had defied subjugation, who fought even as their cities burned. The queen listened, her long fingers tracing the armrest of her throne. "Humans," she whispered, tasting the word like a challenge. "They bleed, yes?" The envoy nodded cautiously. "Then they can die," she said with a smile that sent a chill through the room. "Send word to the fleets. I will see these Deathworlders broken myself." The Vrayan Dominion had conquered 50 worlds, erased 10 species, and enslaved countless others. To them, war was artistry, a performance of superiority, and no enemy had ever survived direct confrontation with their queen. She led from the front, her presence alone enough to make her soldiers fight with fanatical devotion. When the command was issued to march on Earth, the galaxy watched in silence. They had all tried to tame the Deathworlders once, and failed. But perhaps the Vrayan could succeed where others had not. When the invasion began, the skies over Earth burned red. From orbit, the Vrayan ships blotted out the stars. Their weapons cracked the crust of continents. Their nanite storms devoured whole armies. But the humans didn't flee. They didn't surrender. They fought back. Crude weapons by galactic standards, kinetic slugs, chemical rockets, railguns powered by desperation. Yet they struck back with precision and rage. The queen watched the battle unfold through the eyes of her drones, curious rather than impressed. "Primitive," she murmured. "They fight like cornered beasts." But what fascinated her most wasn't their technology. It was their refusal to break. Even as their atmosphere filled with ash, humans laughed. Even as their world cracked, they sang over open channels, taunting her soldiers. They called themselves Deathworlders with pride. The queen didn't understand it. "Fear should silence them," she hissed to her advisor. "And yet they sing." Her advisor, a gaunt creature with translucent skin, bowed deeply. "Perhaps, Majesty, they do not fear death." She smiled coldly. "Then we shall teach them to." The first major ground engagement took place in the ruins of London. The queen herself descended to lead her vanguard. 1,000 armored Vrayan warriors and her elite Praetorians. The city was a wasteland of glass and shadow. Human resistance had been relentless for days before finally going silent. The queen expected an ambush, but she welcomed it. Nothing pleased her more than crushing hope with her own hands. As she walked through the shattered streets, her soldiers' boots left black scorch marks on the ground. The air stank of smoke and iron. Somewhere in the distance, rain began to fall. Then came the gunfire. Not a barrage, just 3 sharp cracks that echoed through the ruins. 3 of her guards fell instantly. The queen tilted her head, amused. "A sniper?" she said softly. "Let it be known, I am not hiding." Her voice carried through the ruined city, amplified by her armor's resonators. "Come, little Deathworlder, show me what your species calls courage." The only response was silence. Then something moved, a flicker of motion on the upper floors of a collapsed building. Her eyes narrowed and she raised a hand. A bolt of plasma vaporized the structure. Dust filled the air, and for a moment, everything was still. Then through the haze, a human emerged. He was tall, armored in battered metal and carbon plates painted with crude insignia, a skull over a burning earth. His rifle hung from a sling, and a jagged knife gleamed at his hip. He wasn't charging. He was walking. Calmly. Deliberately. The queen regarded him with a mixture of intrigue and disdain. "You are the one they call Sergeant Vale," she said, reading his identifier from intercepted transmissions. "Leader of the human resistance in this sector." He stopped 10 meters away, his expression unreadable beneath his cracked visor. "That's right," he said, voice steady despite the blood trickling from his neck. "And you're the thing that thinks it can take Earth." Her lips curled. "Can?" "No, I already have." Vale lifted his rifle, but she moved faster. A flick of her wrist sent a pulse of violet energy crashing into him. The blast threw him back into the rubble, armor cracking, smoke rising from his chest plate. Her soldiers watched silently as the human coughed, tried to stand, and fell again. "Pitiful," she said, approaching him slowly. "Your kind has courage, I'll grant you that. But courage without power is just noise." She knelt beside him, her voice dropping to a purr. "Tell me, Deathworlder, how does it feel to watch your species die?" Vale spat blood and laughed. It wasn't a defiant laugh or even a mad one. It was something far more human. It was tired knowing, amused by the absurdity of it all. "You think we're dying?" he rasped. "Lady, we haven't even started yet." The queen tilted her head, curious despite herself. "You bleed, and yet you laugh," she said. "Why?" Vale smiled faintly, his teeth red. "Because you finally made it fun." He swung his rifle up and fired point blank. The kinetic slug shattered her shoulder plate and sent her stumbling back in surprise. The human was already moving, rolling to his feet, knife flashing in his hand. He lunged, cutting deep into the joints of her armor. She hissed, more from shock than pain. No one had ever drawn her blood in centuries. Her guards moved to intervene, but she raised a hand to stop them. "No," she snarled. "He is mine." She lashed out, claws slashing across Vale's chest, tearing through armor and flesh alike. Blood sprayed across the cracked pavement, and the human dropped to one knee. Still, he didn't stop smiling. "You think pain scares us?" he said through gritted teeth. "We were born in it." The queen felt something stir in her, a mix of fury and awe. The human's eyes burned like wildfire, not with rage, but with purpose. He should have died minutes ago, yet he fought like a creature that didn't understand surrender. When her next strike came, he caught her wrist, twisted it, and drove his knife into the exposed seam between her ribs. The blade sank deep. The queen screamed, a sound that sent her soldiers reeling. Her blood, silver and smoking, hissed as it hit the rain-soaked ground. She tore herself free and stumbled back, clutching her wound. For the first time in her reign, she bled. For the first time, she felt mortal. Vale collapsed beside her, exhausted. His weapon gone, his breaths shallow. The battlefield had gone silent. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. The queen stared at him, disbelief and fury warring in her gaze. "You are broken," she hissed. "You can barely stand." Vale's lips twitched. "Yeah," he said, voice faint, "but I made you bleed." And then he laughed again, a rough, ragged sound that echoed through the ruins of London like a ghost. The queen could have killed him then, crushed his skull beneath her heel, but she didn't. Something about that laugh froze her. It wasn't madness. It was defiance distilled to its purest form. The kind of defiance that no empire, no dominion, no god could ever truly kill. Her soldiers stood in stunned silence as she turned and walked away, leaving the human where he lay. "Take him," she ordered softly. "Alive." Her voice trembled ever so slightly, though none dared to mention it. As they carried Vale away, the queen looked down at the silver blood on her hands, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if victory had meaning anymore, because somewhere in that laugh, she had heard something terrible. Not fear, not surrender, but prophecy. And in that moment, the alien queen realized something the galaxy had long forgotten. Humans didn't fight to win. They fought to make you remember they'd been there. That night, as her ship ascended through the storm, the queen stood before a mirror of living glass, watching her wound close slowly under the care of her nanites. Her reflection stared back, pale and shaken. "They bleed and laugh," she whispered. "How do you conquer something like that?" The question lingered in her mind long after the stars swallowed Earth's horizon. ChatGPT said, "The medical chambers aboard the Vrayan flagship were silent except for the low hum of regenerative vats and the rhythmic pulse of alien machinery. The queen sat upon a dais of black stone, her armor stripped away, her wound sealed but still aching. Her attendants moved in silence, afraid even to breathe loudly. No one spoke of what had happened on Earth, but everyone knew. The queen had bled. The image of her, wounded by a human, had spread across the Dominion like wildfire. Even the most loyal officers whispered of it behind closed doors. And though the official records labeled the event as a tactical encounter resulting in the capture of the enemy leader, the truth gnawed at her like a parasite. That human, Sergeant Vale, had scarred her in more ways than one. She couldn't sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, not the fear she expected, not the despair she had grown accustomed to seeing in conquered species, but the raw, unbreakable amusement of a creature who refused to die quietly. He had looked her in the eye as he bled out and left. The sound still echoed in her mind like a challenge. Her advisor, a tall insectoid figure named Vethar, approached cautiously, carrying a data slate. "Majesty," he said, voice soft and calculated, "the human is secured. His physiology is unlike anything we have seen. His blood coagulates faster than our analysis can adapt, and his nervous system—" He hesitated, searching for words. "It appears to anticipate pain before it happens, as if he were built to endure it." The Queen rose from her throne, her movements slow and deliberate. "Built to endure?" she echoed. "No, they are not built, Vethar. They build themselves." She moved toward the observation glass that separated her chamber from the holding cells below. There, through the translucent barrier, she could see him, Vale, strapped to a containment frame, head bowed, still breathing. His armor had been removed, leaving his scarred torso exposed to the chill of the alien air. Dozens of tendrils pulsed with faint light as they fed data into the machines surrounding him. But the human's vitals were maddeningly stable. "He should be unconscious," Vethar said quietly. "He has lost much blood. And yet he lives," the Queen finished. Her eyes narrowed. "Wake him." Vethar obeyed, tapping a sequence into the control panel. The restraints glowed briefly, releasing a pulse that should have jolted any lesser being into awareness. Vale stirred slowly, his head lifting, eyes blinking open. For a long moment he simply stared at her through the glass. Then, in that same weary, infuriating tone, he said, "You again. Guess I made an impression." The Queen studied him. Even now, surrounded by her power, stripped of his weapons, he smiled. "You did more than that," she replied coolly. "You changed the Dominion's perception of your kind." "Good," Vale said. "Maybe next time they'll think twice before dropping bugs on my planet." The Queen's expression darkened, but not entirely with anger. There was something else, curiosity. "You are brave for a dying creature," she said. "Bravery without hope is madness." Vale's laugh was dry, almost a cough. "Hope? You think we fight because of hope? Lady, we fight because we don't know how to stop. It's instinct. You take everything from a human, home, family, future, and you'll find what's left is something you can't break." Vethar hissed disapproval, but the Queen silenced him with a gesture. She stepped closer to the glass, her reflection merging with Vale's battered image. "You speak of pain as if it were your god," she murmured. "Do all your kind worship it so?" "Not worship," Vale said, voice steady. "Just respect. Pain reminds us we're alive." Her eyes flickered, twin slits narrowing in thought. "And what of death?" He smirked. "That's just the next joke." For the first time in centuries, the Queen didn't have an answer. She turned away sharply. "Enough," she said, and left the chamber without another word. But his words followed her. That night, as her ship drifted through the void between stars, she sat alone in her quarters, staring at the wound that had healed but still throbbed beneath her armor. It wasn't the pain that disturbed her. It was the memory of his smile. Weeks passed. The human was studied endlessly by Dominion scientists. They dissected his blood samples, mapped his neurons, measured his resilience under every form of torture known to their kind. Yet nothing broke him. He screamed, yes, and sometimes he cursed, but he always laughed afterward. Every shock, every cut, every experiment, he treated as though it were an inconvenience rather than agony. The Queen watched the recordings in silence, torn between admiration and fury. Finally, she ordered the experiments to stop. "You will kill him before we understand him," she said. "Bring him to me." When Vale was brought before her again, he was half limping, half dragged, but his eyes were still alive with the same light. He stood barely and gave her a mocking salute. "Your hospitality's terrible," he said, "but the food's worse." The Queen ignored the taunt. "You have survived what should have killed you 10 times over," she said. "Your strength, it defies biology. Tell me, human, what drives you to fight like this? He studied her for a long moment. You really don't get it, do you? He said finally. You think strength comes from power, from fear, from ruling others. But real strength? It comes from loss. You take everything from someone, and if they're still standing after that, they're unstoppable. She tilted her head. Then you are unstoppable? He smiled faintly. Not me, us. The queen frowned. You mean your species? Yeah, he said. You think I'm special? I'm just one of billions who'd crawl through hell if it meant spitting in your face before we die. You killed our cities, burned our skies, and still, somewhere down there, there's a kid holding a rifle waiting for his shot. You can't win against people like that. His words struck her harder than any blade. For the first time she began to understand what made humanity terrifying. Not their weapons, not their numbers, but their spirit. They were chaos given flesh, defiance given purpose. She felt something strange then, something she hadn't felt since before her ascension. Doubt. The Dominion was vast, its fleets endless, its technology unmatched. And yet this one wounded man, this stubborn, bleeding, laughing creature, had made her question it all. That night, she summoned Vethar again. Tell me, she asked, her voice quiet, how fares the war on Earth? Vethar hesitated. The resistance remains. Troublesome, Majesty. They use guerrilla tactics, ambushes, traps. They fight as though the planet itself aids them. Our soldiers report high morale among the humans, despite catastrophic losses. High morale, she repeated, even as they die. Yes, Majesty. She stood, walking to the viewport where the distant blue sphere of Earth shimmered faintly below. Then perhaps, she whispered, we have been fighting them incorrectly. Vethar's mandibles clicked in confusion. Majesty? She turned, her eyes glinting. If they draw strength from pain, then we must give them none. If they laugh in death, we must deny them even that. But even as she said the words, she felt the hollowness of them. Could such creatures truly be subdued by any method? Could one suppress a spirit that turned suffering into defiance? Later, as she lay in her private chamber, the lights dimmed. The queen found herself thinking again of Vale. His words, his blood, his laughter. It haunted her. Against her better judgment, she ordered that he be removed from his cell and brought once more to her presence. Not as a prisoner, but as a guest. When he was escorted in, still bound but walking on his own, she dismissed the guards. The room was quiet. Only the stars beyond the viewport shimmered between them. Why am I here? He asked, suspicion lacing his tone. Because, she said softly, I wish to understand you. Your kind defies reason. You bleed and smile. You lose and fight harder. You die, and yet your shadow lingers. Vale tilted his head. You don't get it because you've never lost, he said. You rule because you were born to it. We rule because we clawed our way there. You inherited your throne. We built ours from the bones of everything that tried to kill us. For a long time, neither spoke. Then the queen said, almost to herself, Perhaps that is why the galaxy fears you. No, Vale said quietly. They don't fear us because we're strong. They fear us because we won't stop. The queen looked at him then, not as a ruler studying an enemy, but as a being confronting something alien and eternal. Humanity's resilience wasn't logical, wasn't scientific. It was something closer to faith, but born from rage and endurance. She felt her pulse quicken. You are dangerous, she said finally. He smiled again. Now you're getting it. When the guards came to return him to his cell, the queen stopped them. No, she said. Let him rest. She turned away, her voice quieter now. He has earned it. And as the doors closed behind him, the queen pressed her hand against her chest, where the scar still pulsed faintly beneath her armor. For all her power, she had never felt so fragile. For the first time she wondered if conquest was not victory but fear disguised as ambition. Outside the flagship, the stars glittered cold and distant, but down on Earth, fires still burned. The humans were still fighting, and somewhere among those flames, the queen imagined hearing it again, the laughter of a species that refused to die. ChatGPT said, Blood pooled beneath Marcus's armor, a slow crimson stain spreading across the metal plates, as the alien palace trembled with the thunder of artillery in the distance. The air reeked of ozone and burned flesh, but he just grinned. His teeth stained pink as he pressed a hand against his wound. The alien guards had fallen silent, uncertain whether to advance or retreat, as the man before them, half dead by any logical standard, chuckled under his breath. "You should have brought more," he rasped, eyes blazing beneath a cracked visor. The Queen of Vilthara watched from her obsidian throne, wings folded against her back, her silver eyes narrowing. She had seen countless species die in silence, their courage dissolving before her beauty and her cruelty alike. But this human, this bleeding, laughing creature, was different. "Why do you smile when your life leaks away, Terran?" she asked, her voice echoing like a chorus of bells. "Do you find death amusing?" Marcus wiped blood from his mouth and looked up at her, eyes sharp and alive. "No," he said, voice raw but steady. "I find you amusing." The chamber gasped, alien guards tightening their grips on spears of plasma crystal. But the Queen simply tilted her head, intrigued. The audacity of this dying soldier stirred something ancient in her. "Your species fascinates me," she murmured, stepping down from her throne with the grace of a predator. "You burn so brightly, even when you should be ash." He coughed, laughed again, and spat blood onto the polished black floor. "Yeah," he said. "We've got a bad habit of outliving expectations." He tried to stand, pain tearing through his abdomen, but refused to show it. His body screamed. His will roared louder. The Queen circled him slowly, her talons clicking softly. "Do you know what we did to your kind before the ceasefire?" she whispered. "We harvested your cities, broke your fleets, turned your bones into monuments of failure." Marcus grinned weakly. "You should have finished the job." Outside, the ground quaked again, orbital strikes lighting up the horizon. The human fleet had returned sooner than expected, cutting through the alien blockade. Marcus could feel it in his chest, that rhythmic pulse of defiance carried through every human soldier in orbit. The Terran vanguard was coming, and the Queen knew it too. "You're not afraid," she said softly, almost disappointed. He shrugged. "Fear's just another thing that dies when you've lost enough people." His eyes flicked upward where the palace dome trembled under distant explosions. "And I've lost everyone I needed to." The Queen's expression shifted, fascination tinged with something unfamiliar. "Then you live only for vengeance?" Marcus smiled, faint but real. "For the promise that one day nobody else has to." Her gaze lingered on him. So fragile, so broken, and yet so impossibly dangerous. She had seen warriors before, gods even, but never one who stood like this. Never one who looked at her not as prey or ruler, but as a challenge. Suddenly the great doors burst open. Human marines stormed the chamber, rifles raised, armor scorched. The Queen's guards lunged forward, but Marcus lifted a hand. "Stand down," he rasped. The humans hesitated, confusion flashing behind their visors. He stepped forward, blood still dripping, and locked eyes with the Queen. "This isn't over," he said, "but you're going to remember this moment. The day you saw what it means when a human bleeds." The Queen tilted her head. "And laughs," she added softly. A single word in her language echoed through the comms. A command. Her guards froze mid-strike. She let him walk past her, past the broken corpses of her elite. The humans surrounded him instantly, forming a protective perimeter as they retreated toward the extraction corridor. But the Queen only watched, silent, as the Terrans vanished into smoke. When they were gone, she touched the blood on the floor, holding it up to the light. It gleamed faintly, even in the darkness. "Strange," she whispered. "It shines." Days passed, and the war worsened. The Terran counteroffensive burned through the stars like wildfire. Every fleet that had once mocked humanity now trembled before their return. The Queen found herself studying the reports, watching footage of the humans fighting. They bled in rivers, but they never stopped. Every fallen soldier seemed to birth 10 more willing to take their place. She found herself haunted by the memory of Marcus's laughter, echoing in her mind. Her advisors warned her to abandon the central system, to regroup beyond the nebulae. But she ignored them. Instead, she ordered that the Terran soldier be found, alive. On the Terran side, Marcus was recovering aboard the Indomitable, Earth's flagship. Medics had replaced half his organs with vat-grown replacements, his spine reinforced with nanofiber. The doctors called him a miracle. His comrades called him the one who made the Queen flinch. He didn't feel like a hero, just a survivor too stubborn to die. But deep inside, he remembered her eyes, not cruel, but curious. The kind of curiosity that could either lead to peace or annihilation. He'd seen that look before, in scientists on Earth before the fall, in generals before a last stand. It was the look of someone standing on the edge of something vast and dangerous. Weeks later, intelligence reported something strange. The Queen had ceased all orbital bombardments. Her fleets were pulling back, not in retreat, but in silence. The Valthara were gathering at their capital world, the same place Marcus had bled before her throne. Command debated the meaning. Some called it fear, others called it preparation for the final stand. Marcus volunteered to lead the recon squad. "She's not finished," he said simply. The dropship cut through the atmosphere of Valthar Prime, flames licking its hull. Marcus felt the old pain stir, the memory of the wound, the laughter, the Queen's eyes. When the ship touched down near the palace ruins, the silence was suffocating. No guards, no drones, just stillness. Inside the shattered hall, the throne stood empty, except for a single mark on the floor, his blood still faintly visible, and beside it, a message carved into the stone in both human and Veil script. "When the stars bleed, will you laugh again, Terran?" He stared at it for a long time, jaw tight. His team fanned out, checking for traps, but found none. It wasn't an ambush. It was an invitation. Then came the voice over comms, a whisper of static, then her tone. "You came back." Marcus froze, eyes scanning the shadows. Couldn't resist the view. The Queen stepped into the light. No guards this time, her wings folded tightly behind her. She wore no crown, no armor, only that same calm gaze. "You fascinate me," she said. "Your kind fights with pain as if it were joy." He smirked. "Pain reminds us we're still alive." She stepped closer. "Then you must feel very alive indeed." He met her gaze, unflinching. "And you must be wondering how long you can keep pretending not to." The silence between them stretched like a drawn bow. Two predators, one made of steel and blood, the other of shadow and grace, studying the reflection of themselves in the other. Above them, the sky rumbled with approaching fleets. War was coming again. But for the first time, Marcus thought it didn't have to. And the Queen, for the first time in centuries, felt something she couldn't name. Something close to hope, born from the laughter of a dying man who refused to bow. Neither spoke again. They didn't need to. Outside, thunder rolled across the alien horizon as two empires held their breath, waiting to see whether blood or laughter would decide the fate of stars. ChatGPT said, "The storm broke over Valthar Prime as human and alien fleets gathered above the planet, their formations glimmering like constellations of war. Thousands of ships drifted in cold silence, waiting for the signal that would ignite another apocalypse." On the ground, inside the ruins of the Obsidian Palace, Marcus stood beside the alien Queen. They were alone, surrounded by ghosts of their fallen soldiers, the air thick with the scent of ozone and rain. He could feel the tremor of distant engines, the hum of energy weapons charging above the clouds, yet neither of them moved to strike. They simply watched the lightning crawl across the darkened sky, each of them knowing that one wrong word could end everything. "You came back to finish me," she said quietly, her voice calm but edged like glass. "If I wanted that," Marcus replied, "you'd already be dead." She turned to him, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "Then why are you here, Deathworlder?" she asked. "To mock me again? To show me your scars as trophies?" He shook his head. "To understand." The Queen tilted her head, studying him. "Understand what?" "What you're afraid of," he said simply. "Because you are afraid, aren't you?" Her jaw tensed. No one, no alien, no subject, no rival, had ever spoken to her like that. She was the empress of 1,000 worlds, the conqueror of 4 empires. Yet this human, this wounded soldier who had bled in her throne room, looked at her not with reverence but with recognition. "The vile Thara do not fear," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. He smiled faintly. "Then why gather all your ships above your own world? Why call back your legions? You're not defending your people, you're hiding behind them." Her wings flared, a reflex of fury, and the air shimmered with her power. Marcus didn't flinch. He'd seen gods die, worlds burn, and monsters kneel. The queen took a step closer until her talons scraped against his chest plate. "You presume too much," she hissed. "You think because you've survived your small wars that you understand what it means to rule?" "I don't," Marcus admitted. "But I understand what it means to lose everything." The words hung between them, heavy and unguarded. The queen's breath caught slightly. Her silver eyes softened. "You've lost someone," she murmured. "Everyone," he replied. "My world, my brothers, the ones who believed peace was still worth dying for. You know what the funny part is?" He gave a bitter laugh. "We still came back. Why?" she asked. "You could have fled into the void, rebuilt somewhere else. Why return to a galaxy that wants you extinct?" He looked up at the sky where flashes of plasma fire lit the clouds. "Because it's home," he said, "and because someone has to remind the stars what humanity means." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain hissed against broken stone, lightning illuminating their faces in brief silver arcs. The queen turned away, her wings folding back as she looked toward the shattered throne. "When I first saw your kind, I thought you were beasts," she said softly. "Primitive, savage, reckless. You fought like creatures who didn't know how fragile life was. But now I think I understand. You fight because it is fragile." Marcus smiled faintly. "We fight because we're not afraid to break if it means someone else gets to live." She glanced at him, and for the first time the queen looked uncertain. "Your people are changing the war," she whispered. "Our fleets cannot adapt to your unpredictability. You break formation, you sacrifice logic, you defy command structures that have existed for millennia. My strategists call you chaos incarnate." "Good," Marcus said, his grin returning. "Chaos keeps us alive." There was something about that grin that both infuriated and fascinated her. It reminded her of the first time she saw him, bleeding on her palace floor, smiling through pain that would have shattered any Vale warrior. "You laugh at pain," she said. "You mock fear. Do all your kind hide behind humor to escape death?" "No," he said. "We laugh to let death know it hasn't won yet." The queen was silent. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. "Perhaps that's why I couldn't kill you," she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Couldn't or wouldn't? Her gaze lingered on him. "Perhaps both." The sound of distant thunder rolled again, this time not from the storm but from the fleets above. The war had begun anew. The humans had launched a warning barrage, and the Veilthara were responding in kind. The sky burned with the light of dying ships. Marcus tapped his comm unit, his expression hardening. "Command, this is Vega," he said, his voice cutting through static. "I'm on the ground with the Queen. Tell the Admiral to hold fire." The voice that answered was sharp and strained. "Negative, Vega. They opened fire first. We can't risk it." "Fleet Command says total engagement authorized," Marcus cursed, slamming his fist against the stone. The Queen watched him, curious. "Even now you would try to save me?" she asked. "This isn't about saving you," he said. "It's about stopping everyone else from dying because 2 species can't get past their pride." "Then what would you have me do?" she demanded. "Bow before your Terran fleet? Surrender my throne?" "I'd have you stand with me," Marcus said. The Queen blinked. "With you?" "Yeah," he said, stepping closer. "Not as enemies, as something new. You've seen what humanity can do when we're pushed. You've seen what happens when we bleed and laugh. You know damn well if this war keeps going, neither of our species is going to survive it. So let's change it." The Queen looked at him for a long, impossible moment. Her instinct screamed that it was madness. Her empire was built on power, dominance, hierarchy, on never yielding. But this human was different. His words carried no manipulation, only conviction. She realized he wasn't asking her to kneel, He was asking her to rise. Above them, the palace shook as debris rained down from the sky. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her into cover as a blast wave tore through the courtyard. They landed hard, his armor scraping across the stone. When the dust settled, he looked up at her, her face inches from his. "Still think we're beasts?" he asked. She hesitated, her wings twitching. "No," she said finally. "Something far worse." He laughed, wincing from the pain in his ribs. "Good. I'd hate to disappoint." The Queen stood, her gaze shifting toward the horizon where the first wave of human ground forces descended. She could end it with a word. One command, and the palace defense grid would obliterate the dropships. But something stopped her. For the first time in her reign, she hesitated to pull the trigger. "Tell your commander," she said softly, "to halt his advance." Marcus blinked. "You're serious?" "Do it," she said. "Before I change my mind." He tapped his comm again. "Command, stand down. The Queen's offering a ceasefire." There was silence on the other end, then disbelief. "You expect us to trust her?" "She's trusting us," Marcus said. "Do the same." A pause. Then slowly the firing above ceased. The clouds thinned, revealing the glint of ships drifting in uneasy stillness. For the first time in centuries, Velthar Prime's sky was quiet. The Queen turned to Marcus, studying him with unreadable eyes. "You've risked your life and your people's trust for this," she said. "Why?" "Because someone has to take the first step," he answered. "And I already bled for it once." She gave a small nod, her wings lowering. "Then let it be known," she said softly, "that the Vilthara will listen." Marcus exhaled slowly, tension leaving his body for the first time in weeks. That's all we've ever wanted. But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. Ceasefires were fragile things, easily shattered by fear, greed, or vengeance. The next few days would decide everything. As the storm began to fade, the Queen turned her gaze upward. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "the universe has room for two kinds of madness after all." Marcus smiled, exhausted but certain. "Then let's make sure ours outlasts theirs." In that moment, amidst ruin and rain, the laughter of one human, and the silence of an alien queen marked the first breath of peace between two species that had only ever known war. Neither of them trusted it fully. Neither believed it would last. But they both knew one thing beyond doubt. Something had changed forever. As night fell over the scarred planet, the Terran fleet held position. The Velthara legions withdrew from the outer moons, and in the shadows of a broken throne room, two enemies stood side by side, not as conqueror and prey, but as survivors of the same impossible galaxy. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the stars above Velthar Prime did not burn. They simply watched. The days that followed were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The human fleet and the Vilthara armadas hovered in tense silence above Vilthar Prime, their weapons cold but their fingers trembling over the triggers. No treaties, no handshakes, just a ceasefire held together by the will of a bleeding soldier and an alien queen who had begun to question everything she'd ever known. Marcus Vega remained on the planet's surface under the Queen's guarded supervision. He was not a prisoner anymore, nor quite an ally, but something in between, a symbol of impossible defiance. Soldiers from both sides watched his every move, their hands itching for their weapons, uncertain whether he was the bridge to peace or the spark that would reignite the stars. Marcus walked the cracked courtyards of the palace often, his armor dented and his bandages visible through the seams. He moved slowly but deliberately, every step echoing against the obsidian walls that once shimmered with the light of conquest. The Queen followed him one evening, her footsteps silent, her silver eyes reflecting the dusk. "You walk as if you own my palace," she said, voice sharp but faintly amused. He turned slightly, that same crooked smile curling his lips. "Old habit. Humans walk like they belong, even when they don't." "You belong nowhere," she said softly. He nodded. "That's the problem. Or maybe that's the reason we survive." They walked together beneath the shattered archways, the wind carrying the scent of rain and smoke. "Do you regret what you've done?" Marcus asked suddenly. The Queen paused. "Which part?" "Any of it." Her wings shifted, a faint rustle like silk tearing. "Regret is a word for those who still have time to change," she said. "I have ruled for centuries. My choices built an empire. My mistakes buried millions. What good is regret to a creature who has already shaped her destiny in blood?" Marcus looked up at her, eyes unreadable. "It means you're still human where it counts." The Queen frowned slightly at the word. "Human?" She said it as if it were a foreign taste in her mouth. "You call it a strength. I've always seen it as your weakness." "Maybe it's both," he said. "Maybe that's why we bleed and laugh at the same time." The Queen stopped walking and faced him. "You keep returning to that moment," she said. "When you laughed in my throne room, dying in your own blood. I still do not understand it." Marcus's eyes drifted distant for a second. "Because if I cried instead, I'd have given you power. Laughter was the only thing that still belonged to me." For a long time, the Queen said nothing. Then quietly she asked, "And now? Does your laughter still belong to you?" He smiled faintly. "That depends on what you do next." The Queen turned away, her expression unreadable. "Tomorrow," she said, "the Council will arrive. The rulers of my conquered worlds. They will not accept this ceasefire. They will demand your head, and if I refuse, they will tear this world apart." "Then I guess tomorrow's going to be interesting," Marcus said dryly. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat on the palace balcony watching the lightning storms flicker across the horizon. The air was heavy with the scent of iron and rain. He thought about Earth, its oceans, its mountains, the laughter of soldiers huddled around dying fires. He thought about the ones who never came back, the ones who believed peace was a myth. And then he thought of the Queen, of the strange flicker of humanity in her eyes. He wondered if maybe, for the first time, the universe had given them a chance that neither deserved but both needed. The dawn came red. The Council's ships descended like spears of light, their landing craft forming a ring around the palace. The Queen stood at the base of her throne, regal and unmoving, her wings flaring behind her like living armor. Marcus stood beside her, unarmed but unflinching. The doors opened, and the Council entered. 7 alien lords, each representing a sector of the Viel Empire. Their robes shimmered with power, their eyes sharp with contempt. "Your Majesty," hissed the eldest, a creature of crystalline skin and molten eyes, "you summoned us, and we find you consorting with the Deathworlder. Explain this blasphemy." The Queen's voice carried through the hall like thunder. "This human came to my throne as an enemy," she said. "He bled before me." He laughed in death's face. "He showed me what it means to fight not for conquest but for life. I have seen his kind's madness, and I would see it joined to ours rather than destroy us both." The chamber erupted in furious whispers. One counselor slammed a clawed hand against the floor. "You would ally with vermin? They are chaos given form. They burn everything they touch." The Queen's gaze turned cold. "And yet they still live while our fleets fall. Perhaps there is something to learn from chaos." Another voice rose. "You would bow to them?" "I would stand beside them," she said, "as equals." That was the breaking point. The Council erupted in shouts, several of the guards raising their weapons. Marcus instinctively stepped forward, placing himself between her and the counselors. "You might want to think twice," he warned. "We've got a saying back home, 'Shoot one of us, and 10 more show up with bigger guns,'" the eldest hissed. "You threaten the Council in our own hall?" "I don't make threats," Marcus said calmly. "Just predictions." The Queen raised a hand, silencing both sides. "Enough!" Her wings spread wide, shimmering in the dim light. "If you will not stand with me, then you will stand against me. But I will no longer rule through fear." Her declaration echoed across the hall, shattering centuries of tradition. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the first shot rang out. A counselor's guard fired, the bolt grazing the Queen's shoulder. She staggered, but Marcus moved faster. He lunged forward, tackling her out of the path of a second shot, rolling to his feet as chaos erupted. Guards clashed, plasma blades screamed, and Marcus dove behind a column, ripping a fallen weapon from the ground. The Queen rose beside him, blood trailing down her arm, her expression furious. "You could have let them kill me," she said. "Yeah," Marcus replied, firing into the advancing guards. But then who'd finish what we started? They fought side by side, the human's brutal efficiency blending with the Queen's elegant precision. The chamber filled with smoke and light, bodies falling, glass shattering. At last, silence fell. The surviving counselors fled, their voices echoing down the corridors, swearing vengeance and exile. Marcus leaned against a pillar, panting. His armor smoked, his weapon empty. "Well," he said, "that went better than I expected." The Queen straightened, her wound still bleeding but her eyes alight. "You've made me an enemy of my own empire," she said. He smirked. "Welcome to humanity." She stared at him, then laughed, a sharp musical sound that startled even her. "You are a contagion, Marcus Vega," she said, "and I fear it's already spreading." Above them, the palace shook as ships began to lift off. Some vile captains, loyal to the Queen, stayed in orbit. Others turned their guns toward her world. The fragile ceasefire shattered. But this time, something had changed. Human ships formed protective lines around the planet, their commanders sending a single encrypted message to all channels. "Hold. The Queen stands with Earth." The next hours were fire and fury. Betrayal and loyalty collided in orbit, and the night sky turned into a storm of light. Marcus and the Queen watched from the tower side by side. "If this fails," she said quietly, "you know they'll destroy us both." Marcus smiled faintly, the wind tugging at his torn uniform. "Then we'll make it one hell of a story." The battle raged for a day and a night. When it ended, half the vile fleet was gone, but the Queen still ruled, not through fear, but through the loyalty of those who saw something greater in her. The galaxy that once trembled before her now looked to her with wary respect, and humanity, once thought extinct, once mocked as savages, stood at her side as equals. Weeks later, peace talks began. They met in the ruins of her throne room, where once she had mocked a dying man. Now she sat not above him but beside him. "Do you still laugh when you bleed, Terran?" she asked softly. He looked at her and grinned. "Only when it's worth it," she smiled faintly. "Then perhaps your madness is the cure this galaxy needs." Marcus turned toward the window, watching the twin suns rise over Veilthar Prime. "No," he said, "not a cure, just a reminder. Pain means we're alive. Laughter means we still remember why." And as dawn broke across the shattered world, the universe changed. Not because of peace treaties or diplomacy, but because a dying soldier had laughed in the face of a queen and taught her that even in a galaxy built on fear, there was still room for defiance, for courage, for something dangerously human. They called it the Day of the Laughing Blood. And across the stars, every soldier who heard the story whispered the same thing. Never mock a human's pain, because that's when they're most dangerous.